I'm Shawna Jeavons here with my friend Ian, and who I brought in to have a conversation about my vision for the 3rd District. I'm running for 3rd District Supervisor of Mendocino County.
Well, Shawna, thank you for arranging this and having me have a conversation with you today. I'm thrilled, and I think we'll get into this, but I think there's a lot of really compelling reasons to support your candidacy for supervisor. And I think a lot of that goes back to your childhood and how you were raised, and I know it's a really kind of a cool story. So if you could, just tell me a little bit about how you grew up, where you grew up, and how that has shaped who you are, and why that would make you a great candidate for supervisor.
All right, great question. Well, I was quoted in the newspaper saying that I was raised by Amish wolves, and some people ask me what that means. And when in teaching high school, I was trying to explain to my students that we didn't have TV. We hauled our water in buckets from the neighbor's spring. My parents built a Class K home with their one of their best friends by hand, so I'd take care of my little sister while they were building it. It was hard for my students to understand that I'd never watched certain TV shows. We'd play Jeopardy in class, and I wouldn't know the answers. So yeah, I was raised way out on the top of Pine Mountain, and my parents moved here in the 80s to, my dad actually chose Willits because it had soil that was much like a third world hillside. There were rocks. It wasn't really good, proper soil. So he wanted to let people know that they could grow their own food even if their soil was not optimal, that they could build it up slowly with agriculture. So we did live way out in the hills, and we didn't have TV. And my parents really cared about not only the environment, but just the education of the world and our future. And my dad, people would say, was ahead of his time in a way, because he foresaw that we were going to need to grow our own vegetable gardens and whatnot. And I think I appreciate it more now than I did growing up. Growing up, I thought, oh, why can't we live in town and ride our bicycles around and go to the normal things kids do, Tupperware parties and roller skates. But, in hindsight, I really appreciate that upbringing, that my parents were both committed to public service and valued a sustainable vision for the future.
And resilience. I mean, there was, you grew up kind of self-sustaining, growing your own food and taking care of yourself.
Right.
How has that shaped kind of how you view our future in the county, and how can you take that experience and apply it to this new role?
This candidacy, well, it gave me a can-do attitude. That's for sure. It was, if you want something done, do it, get it done, figure out a research project, research it, and make it happen. So I think it really set me up for a hopeful future and a vision that we could make anything happen.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I think that says so much about all of us here that choose to live in Mendocino County anyways. There's that creativity, that resilience, that a willingness to just figure out the solutions. And we were able to do that just by growing up here, and that's awesome.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think a lot of us live here because we're so into self-sufficiency, and it's great, it's wonderful, and it's wild. And I think now in 2018 is the time to not only be self-sufficient, but come together and network and work together to achieve a common means, especially when our culture in Mendocino County is kind of in survival mode, at least in the 3rd District at this point, and bring it back up to a thriving.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, we're a huge transition time. There's several different things that have happened to us all kind of at once, with the bypass, cannabis legalization, the ADA requirements, wildfire. I mean, we've just been so it's a huge time of transition and opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about that in terms of what are if you could. I know there's a lot of things you want to accomplish, but if there are 3 things that you're looking to see focused on or accomplished in your first year as supervisor, what would those 3 things be, and why?
Well, I'd like to take a holistic approach. So the 3 things that are most important to me are housing, education, and economic development. So if I were to roll them all into one project, it would be to create a housing project to provide affordable housing that utilizes our schools, involves particularly the high school construction, and in turn also training people from out of the area in our innovative housing, so that we're adding to the economic development, all 3 in one. So it'd be housing, education, economic development.
Great. Well, and that just proves the point around being creative and finding solutions, and it's not just one issue
Right.
most important. It's
They're
how can we-
all related. Yeah, all related to each other.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and do you have any examples of some kind of innovative, I know you have some really innovative ideas around construction and housing and building, and do you have some specific examples of how to incorporate that within the education and housing and economic development into one?
Currently, the high school students from Willits High School are doing, a few of them applied to do a summer program. It's a 1 week long program in Ukiah, and they're trained in construction. They get a paycheck at the end of the week, and then employers come in and offer them jobs. I think at about starting at $18 or $19 an hour. So they interview the students after they're done with the program. And I'd like to see, there's so many great things going on here. I'd like to see us take these seedlings of greatness and then expand them outward by creating a project that I would love to see a 3D printer in Mendocino County. I'd love to see affordable home design using techniques such as passive solar. I know that when I was in high school, about my junior year, we moved into town into these, with my mom, into these low-income apartments. And just the way the trees were grown and the facing of the windows were, our PG&E bill was $20 a month because it was so efficient. And it was a passive solar design. It didn't require any fancy solar panels. So I think design and architecture is really important. I'd like to work with, there's a guy, Charlie, out towards North Spur, that's an architect in his 80s, and he does some really innovative design. So I think just pulling and networking, like I said, utilizing the high school and the county resources and, the fire disaster resources, and using Charlie as an architect, and just pull everyone together into forums and listen and come up with a great program that is a win-win situation for everybody.
Yeah, I love that idea of
Yeah.
how do we blend tried and true practices with new technologies, right? And we talked before we started the interview around the recent Willits, I believe it's Willits Now and Then. It was an installation at the county museum.
Yeah.
And I think it reflects all of the 3rd District at large. But it was really interesting, and I want to kind of hear some of your takeaways from that installment. What I learned from that and what I saw just through the pictures and the stories was, we've always been an evolving community and changing community from our native peoples who were here originally to the European settlers who brought in timber and ranching, to the back to landers. My family moved here in the late 70s. And we've always just kind of evolved and changed as we've grown, and that was a really big, significant takeaway for me.
Right.
And here we're at another inflection point, right? Cannabis is now legal, and that's we've been defined in large part in many ways. So what's next?
Yeah. Great question.
How can we use some of our rich history that we do have that's so great, and build upon that in kind of this new way?
Yeah, well, I think definitely the museum is a gem. The county museum is actually located in the 3rd District in Willits, and I think building upon that, I'd love to see more of a county park next to it and the skunk train coming to it. So I think building upon what we already have as far as historical gems and what great projects people already have going here. And I think the other key component is communication, is listening and having places to convene for open discussion so that we can put our heads together, whether it's the art center or right here. Yeah. So, just having those conversations openly to figure out what our direction is so we can shape our future instead of being shaped by what comes our way.
Yeah. My next question is related to that. How is it that, how do you feel that you can kind of galvanize kind of this younger generation, our generation, right? We both went to Willits High School in the early 90s, mid-90s, right? And now we're in our 40s and have kids and careers, and all of our friends are in that boat. So,
right.
How is it that you feel that you can kind of reach out and galvanize this group of people to put forward and bring forward some of these innovative changes that you have in mind?
I really feel that I have the energy and the networking skills that it takes to be inclusive to everybody. I don't just represent one group, because I grew up here. Always in an inclusive environment. I know even in high school, I would play the inclusive sports that nobody got cut from because I couldn't stand to see people not being able to play that wanted to play. So, it was like volleyball, wrestling, swimming, all the sports that everybody could participate in, and that's just always been a big part of who I am. And I think that the young, fresh energy of our generation coming in, being able to represent that as well as the older and younger generations, and providing an inclusive playing field where everybody has a voice and feels good working together, so that we can create more win-win situations instead of polarizing on issues, and just come to agreement of what would best benefit us all to thrive into the future.
Yeah. It's a breath of fresh air. That's great. Well, there's a few other questions that I know that others in the community have brought forth, both to you individually and to others of us that are supporting your campaign. I'd just like to have the opportunity to address some of those questions if we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
How will you be able to manage this? This is a heavy duty, stressful
Yes,
position.
I have been asked that question.
Yeah.
I hope there's other candidates out there being asked that same question.
Yes, indeed.
I just must say, but I just want to point out that I graduated UC Berkeley at the age of 40. So that was last year. That was May of 2017. And I raised my two children. They're now 9 and 11 while I took full-time classes and worked a 40-hour-a-week job. So I think that UC Berkeley is pretty rigorous. My job was pretty rigorous. My kids are rigorous, and I'm up to the challenge.
Rigorous kids, indeed.
Yeah.
In terms of experience, so there's some of the other candidates, and again, I'll just say this too: all the candidates are wonderful candidates.
Absolutely.
That you listen, people's hearts are in the right place, and really, I think it's a reflection of of our community. It's a great place. We're in a big transition, big challenge, but people really care.
Yes.
Yes. But there is that question, and some of these folks have been around for a lot longer and have more boards and experience and so forth under their belt. So, can you speak to that issue of experience and how that fits into the mix?
Absolutely. Well, I think my yoga teacher used to say, having means nothing if you don't know what to do with it. So you could have that experience, or you could have that home, you could have that title, but if you don't know what to do with it, it doesn't really mean anything. So I think that there are ways in which experience does mean something, definitely. And I think as far as the 3rd District Supervisor position goes, that out of the 8 candidates, Pinches is the only one with real, true experience in this exact position on the board. The rest of us will be fresh at it for sure. Mm-hmm. And so I think that just, listening to, one thing that Pinches had actually pointed out at a forum was that all of these issues that we're being asked at the forums will already be resolved by the time we're on the board. So just the ability to think critically, use good judgment, be inclusive, and create win-win situations is going to be important, because new issues will be thrown at you all the time as far as being on there. So yeah, I definitely think experience can be important, but I think there are other factors that are important also, as far as being genuine and having good judgment and being able to be up to the challenge.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, we'll wrap up with this, I suppose. But as we talked about, there are a lot of candidates, and this is obviously a very important time in our history. So what makes you different? Why should we vote for Shawna Jeavons for Supervisor?
Yeah, I think actually on Mother's Day, I got an email from a lady in Laytonville, and she was explaining why she was voting for me. And I'd probably like to just quote her, but basically the gist of her email was that we have been a lost district for so long, and that we deserve to be fairly represented. And she expressed that she felt confident that I would represent so many voices, or all the voices equally, kind of thing. That and she expressed too, like you said, that there are so many good candidates, and when candidates she's been friends with for so long. And I love going to the forums, and I love hanging out with all the candidates. I feel like I have this great group. It feels like a sports team. Here we are again, and this great group of people having dialogue with the audience and with each other, and just bringing each other up as far as people. So I think that each candidate definitely has a special skill set, and I think that my special skill set is that I come from a generation of people that I still have fresh energy. I'm raising these little kids, they keep me on my toes. So I think that bringing that fresh energy to the plate, as well as just including everyone and really listening, and a genuineness, an authenticity and transparency.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that's what, when I heard that you were running for supervisor, I'd seen some of the other signs and so forth out, and it's great. But for me, right away, I saw your name. I saw a sign. I was like, yep, it's time. It's time,
It's
and,
time.
and for me, that's what really stands out, and like you articulated in terms of representing kind of a new, fresh energy. The times are asking for that. So
Yes.
good luck.
Well, thank you. Thanks
Yeah.
for being here.
Got it.